Hello and welcome back to StreamView.com.
This lecture, we're going to learn about while loop. So in our previous lecture, we learned about for loop. We wrote some Java code that actually executes the for loop. So in this lecture, we're going to learn about while loop. So let's take this example here. So I've got this x equal 10, right? So I declared this x variable, okay, which is an integer, to be 10, right? I initialize this x variable equal to 10. Then I have this condition here, which says that if x is greater than or equal to 0, right? If it's equal to or greater than 0, I want to execute this loop code here, my code here, decrementing my decrementing this x variable, okay, -1. Then it goes back here. So now it becomes 9. So 9 is greater than or equal to 0, true, and it's going to go back in here and execute in a loop. So until and unless this x is 0, right? Once it becomes 0, then it's going to end the code, because now your x is 0 is less than or equal to 0, true, right? So if it's true, it's x is greater than or equal to 0, false, so it's gonna execute this line of code here. Alright, so what happens when you write in our Java code? How do you do that? Well, I've got this while loop here, and I've got this main method here. Then I actually initialize my variable x, or here I, okay, you can name whatever you want, equal 10. Then here I've got using a while loop here. So with while loop here, what I'm saying is if this I, right, is greater than or equal to 0, right, then I'm actually printing this line of code here. Okay, so I is 10, right? So 10 is greater than or equal to 0, yes. So it's going to execute this line of code. So this number is, it's going to say 10. And then I'm actually decrementing the I using I minus minus. Okay, that's how you decrement it. If you want to increment it, it's going to be I plus plus. So I want to actually subtract 1 from this I. So I'm doing I minus minus. So now it's going to go back to this while loop again. So now, since you subtracted 1, it's going to be 9, right? 9 is greater than or equal to 0. True. So it's going to execute this line of code here. So now, until, let's say 1 here, right? So 1 is greater than or equal to 0. True. That's going to do this one here. So now, 0 is greater than or equal to 0. True. Since I have an equal sign here, it's going to execute this line of code here. Now, if it's become negative, then actually it's not going to execute this line of code, so it's going to exit. So it's going to run this while loop until your I is less than 0. So actually, if you run this code, again, like I said here, starts from 10, and it execute into 0. Okay, because I have this equal sign here. So my I was 10, then it has this while loop here. And this while loop, I have this condition here. If I is greater than or equal to 0. So if your I is greater than or equal to 0, then you execute this line of code. So it says number equal 10. So it goes back to 9 here. 9 is greater than true. Yes. And goes blah 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 and says 1. 1 is greater than or equal to 0. True. System.println number is 1. And it subtract 1. So now you have 0, right? So 0 is greater than or equal to 0. 0 is not greater than 0, but 0 is equal to 0. So it's going to execute. Number is 0. And it's going to subtract 1. So now your I is -1. And it's -1 greater than or equal to 0. No, false. So it's not going to run your code. That's how you can actually write while loop. But again, also for while loop are commonly used loops. Then you're going to write in your real-time projects. So I would like you to actually practice this with different examples. Just gave you one of the simplest example of while loop and for loop. The next one here is do while loop. Okay, so let's actually see how it works. So it's kind of similar to while loop, okay? But it has this different syntax here. So I've got this int count equal 10, right? So here I've named this variable instead of I've named it count. So now I have got this do code here. Okay, so what it's going to do is it's going to run this code here. System.out.println count is count minus. So just like the while loop, right? So instead of while first, I got this do here. So actually it's going to do this. It's going to run this code inside the do. So it's going to run this until count is greater than or equal to 0, just like we did before, right? So I've got the while at the end, and I've got the do before, right? So you're going to do this and while the count is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, that's the syntax of do while. Then when you run this, it's going to be exactly just like while loop. Okay, start from 10. It's going to go all the way, and here first what happens is it's going to be 10. It's going to say do system.out.println. Actually, it's going to go to this one here, this line of code. It says this count is greater than or equal to 0, so it's going to do this line of code here. It's going to execute this line of code. I go on decrement 1, so now it becomes 9. 9 is greater than or equal to 0, then it's going to actually run this code here. Count is 9, and so on. So now 1 is greater than or equal to 0, true. It's going to execute this line of code. Count is 0 is equal to greater than or equal to 0. 0 is not greater than 0, but it's equal to 0. So it's going to run this count is 0. As soon as you have -1, it's not going to do this, execute this command inside the do loop. That's how you can actually write do while loop. While loop, do while loop, and for loop are probably one of the most commonly used loops that you're going to use in your real-time projects. Okay, and you're going to see a lot of loops in Java. I would like you to actually familiarize with for while and do while. I've given you like very common examples, but you can use other examples and try to like familiarize with this kind of loops. So now let's go to our IntelliJ and write some code for while and do while loop. So I'm actually going to go IntelliJ and actually going to go new source and actually going to create a class here. And I'm going to say while loop here. I'm actually going to expand this. Here I'm actually going to create our main method here again. Void main string, and here I'm actually going to say int I equal 10. Okay, while I is less than or equal to 0. I actually want to run, say number is here. I'm actually going to say number I, then I'm actually going to decrement the I. So I've got this I here, or you can use X. Okay, I'll just use X here for clearance. Then I've got this variable X here, and I said X equal 10, then I said X is less than or equal to 0. Sorry. It's greater than or equal to 0. Then I'm actually going to print this line of code here. System.println number is. So as long as this one X is greater than or equal to 0, I'm actually printing this line of code here. Then I'm actually decrementing this X. Alright, so let's see what happens. I'm going to close other files here. Then I'm actually going to run this. So as you can see here, it started from 10, then it all the way went to 0, right? Since I've got this equal to 0, right, it ran this kind of code here. System.out.println, number is 0. Now I've subtracted 1. So now your number becomes -1. So -1 is greater than or equal to 0, false. So it's not going to execute this line of code. So compared to for loop, the syntax is a little easier, right? But that's how you can use actually while loop. Again, while and for loop are very commonly used on loops, so I would like you to, really get familiarized with this. All right, so now let's do while loop. So I'm actually going to do while loop, and here I'm going to say static void main string args, and in here I'm actually going to say int x equal 10, and here I'm actually going to say do. I'm going to say system.out.println. So here I'm going to say number is, say x. All right, and I'm actually going to do x. So x minus means you're decrementing 1. That's x minus it's just like x minus 1. And while x is greater than or equal to 0. Right, so let's run this code here. So I'm going to do, see, same thing, right? Just like while loop, we're using do while here, and I'm using x equal to x minus 1, right? Because you're decrementing 1, right, into the x, so it's x minus 1. Okay, so you can use x minus 1, or you could use x minus minus. Same thing. If I do this, it's going to run the same line of code here. Alright, so that's it for this lecture. Okay, I hope you guys learned about while loop and do while loop. And also we learned how you can write some Java code using while and do while loop. Alright, so that's it for this lecture. I'll see you guys in our next lecture.